Welcome to part 12 of our Galaga tutorial in Godot here. This is one of our last parts here, so we should be getting done this pretty quickly. So, for this part, we're going to be talking about adding a user interface. Now, we're going to do something really simple here. All we're going to do is we're going to add in a health bar and a points counter and a game over, so that when the player dies, it just pops up game over. There's lots more we could add here. We could add in like a button to start the game, or we could add in a lot of other features here, maybe like a weapon indicator or things, but those are things we can add later. Right now, we're sort of wanting just the basics that we need here. Before we start, though, there's something that we should talk about with regards to how we need to pass information in Godot. So here I've got my main scene here, and in Godot, when we want to pass information between scenes and between parts of our game here, there's some things that we should keep in mind. First one is, main scene here has a map and has a player as part of it, and they're going to need to pass information between them. The player is going to need to pass information to a user interface, which will also be part of the main scene, and the map will also need to pass information. The map's going to spawn enemies. Those are going to need to be passed to the user interface to count points, stuff like that. However, we don't want siblings to be able to talk to each other. So in Godot, the general pattern is that siblings shouldn't talk directly to each other. So the map really shouldn't need to know if the player exists. The player really shouldn't need to know if the map exists. The player needs to know when it gets hit. So if something crashes into the player, that's great. If we're doing physics calculations and we go, we collided with someone, they should be able to talk. But the enemies shouldn't talk directly to the player. The player shouldn't talk directly to the user interface. So the general pattern is, what we do is we say we signal up and we call down. The player, for example, will pass signals up to the main scene and then leave it from there. So the player says, hey, I took damage, or hey, I died. And then the main scene is responsible for doing something about that. But the player itself doesn't go and change the health bar. Similarly, the user interface might need to pass information. If we click on a button on the user interface, it might need to start something like start the game. What we do is we say the user interface sends a signal and then lets someone else deal with what that means. Okay? The reason for this is that this is good programming practice, and it's called encapsulation. Essentially, what we want to do is we want to make sure that our information is limited to only the people who need to know about it, or only the scenes, or only the classes, or only the objects that need to know about it. We don't want the player changing stuff about the user interface, because later on, maybe we change the user interface, and the player then doesn't know how to work with that. So if we change the user interface, all of that stuff should be only limited to the user interface. The player shouldn't have anything to do with it. Same thing. Later on, we're going to need to change the player. Like we might want to say, hey, the player can have a new weapon, or the player has a different ship, or something like that. And that's great, except then the user interface, we shouldn't have to recode that. Right? We should limit our changes as small as possible, which helps prevent bugs. That way we only need to fix something in one place if there's a problem with it, or if we want to change it or update it or improve it or something. So from there, our idea is we're going to get our scenes here, like the player and the map and the enemy, to send signals when something important changes about them. So our player, let's start with our player. So I'm going to go to our player here and actually find our player script here. This is player.gd. And what we're going to do is we're going to add some signals. And in Godot, it's a good idea to, or we need to create our signals up at the top here to say it's possible for our player to listen to or to emit these signals. And I'm going to name the first one health changed. And I'm going to go health changed current max. So whenever the player's health changes, we're going to emit a signal that says my health changed, and we're going to pass up both the current health and our max health. That will be important because that'll let our user interface then adjust a slider based on that, based on how much health it has. We're also going to go signal player died. So when the player dies, it'll emit a signal. These are the signals we can emit. Now what we need to do is emit them when the player takes damage or when the player dies. So I'm going to go down here to my take damage function, and this is really nice. We made a function that takes damage. So when I take damage, what I'm going to do is right after I clamp my current hit points, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do health changed dot emit, and then we're going to do current HP max HP, just like that. If you're coming from Godot 3, the emitting structure for signals has changed very slightly here. You now say the name of the signal dot emit, and it's a better way to do this. It allows you to see errors sooner in the process, so that's good. So when we take damage, we emit a signal about that, and I'm actually going to comment out this print here, this testing line, because we don't need it right now. Down in the die function, I'm going to comment out that line as well, and then I'm going to go player died.emit, just like that. That's all I need to do. Okay. And then it will delete this. Notice I'm emitting the signal before it queues it for deletion. This queue free will allow this code to finish before it removes this player, but this here, the player died.emit, should happen first. That's just a better idea. All right, let's go to our enemy now. So our enemy is likewise going to have to emit a couple of signals. So at the top of the enemy.gd script here, by our variables, we're going to do signal health changed current max. Same thing as our player. And I'm going to say signal enemy died. So these are really similar here. You may notice that our enemy and our player share a lot of code here. We could have both the enemy and the player inherit from the same class, and so they could share that code. And that might be a good idea. For this really simple game, it's okay the way we've done it. So the enemy here, if I go down to my take damage function, I'm going to emit that signal. So health changed dot emit, and then current HP max HP. Right now, I don't have plans to add in health bars for the enemy, but we could. And this might be useful for having a boss. If we want a boss fight later, we could hook up a health bar to the boss's health changed signal, and that would work great. So this is sort of planning for the future if we want to do that. Same idea. Down here, we're going to go and we're going to do enemy died.emit. Just like that. Done. Alrighty, so our enemy now, I'm going to save the script here. Our enemy has the signals that emit in the right places. And we're going to go to our bullet here. Sorry, no, we don't need the bullet. We need to go to the map. The map also is going to emit a signal here. So the map is going to emit a signal when it spawns an enemy, and that's going to allow us to allow the main scene to wait until an enemy dies, and when an enemy dies, then it can add points. But the main scene doesn't know about all of the enemies yet, because the enemies spawn in over time. So the enemies that are created halfway through the game are not yet in the main scene, so we're going to have to find a way of getting those enemies to the main scene. So we're going to tell the map to send a signal when it spawns an enemy. Signal enemy spawned. And we're going to pass up the enemy that we spawned. So this here is we're going to signal when we spawn an enemy, and that happens on spawn timer timeout. And I'm just going to do that right at the bottom here of on spawn timer timeout. And enemy spawned.emit. And we're going to pass up the enemy here. So the E is the enemy that we are going to spawn. And we're going to pass up that enemy that we did spawn there. Okay. Now let's save that. So we've got our map and our player and our enemy signals here. And next, we're going to go and we're going to create a new scene for our user interface. So we need to set that up, and we're going to add some code to that. Now, our UI scene is going to be an entirely new scene. I'm going to create it in Scenes here. Right-click, Create New Scene. And this is not the only way, but it is the way I prefer because it puts it in the right folder right away. So I'm going to make sure this is a user interface root type here. That's important. And I'm going to name this one just UI. Done. There we go. Here's our scene. You can see we have ui.tscn in our file system here. And we're going to save it. And we're going to add our elements to our user interface from here. So our user interface is going to look like this. It grabs the size of this. And if I actually look, you can see it's got the size that it grabbed from the project settings there, which is nice. So when we're setting up a user interface, usually what we want to do is we want to use containers such as an HBox or like a VBox. It's a bunch of different containers here. HBox containers. You can see there's an HBox container, there's VBox, there's grid, there's a whole bunch of different things here that allow us to arrange these controls and these UI elements or user interface elements in logical ways. That's important when you're doing most games because it might be running on different screens, right? If your game is running on on a computer screen versus if it's running in a web browser versus if it's running on a phone or something like that, it's going to be a different size. And so you want it to naturally fit to that size. This is especially important if you're doing anything with mobile games because just about every darn phone has a different screen size, right? Like an iPhone 11 versus 12 has a different screen size. A Galaxy versus a Pixel phone has a different screen size. So you can't rely on everything having, like, putting it at, say, 300 to be the same on every phone. However, for our game, because we're limiting this to a simple situation here, and we've got a screen that we know is 600 by 800, and we're not changing it. We've, in fact, disabled the ability to change it. We're okay. We're just going to put them on here and keep it simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in here, and we're going to set the size of this root node. So I'm going to go to the properties here. We're going to go layout, and we're going to go custom minimum size. And I'm actually going to set 600 and 800 here. And that's going to be the minimum size of our control so that it's this control or this user interface is always going to be the correct size. We're going to go from there. Now we're going to add a new progress bar. So add a new node, progress bar, just like that. And now we're going to take that progress bar and move it. So let's take this progress bar here and let's uncheck show percentage here. I don't want to show the percentage on this progress bar. We're going to go down to underneath control. We're going to find layout here. And underneath this layout here, we're going to go find transform. And our size here, we're going to set the Y size to 250. Oops, sorry. The X size to 250. Let's reset this and make it a little better. So, cool. There we go. 250 on the X and 27 on the Y is good. Okay. So let's now take this bar, and if I look at this, that looks like it's about the right size for our game window. It's not the whole way across, but it's reasonable. And I'm going to put this in the middle. So when we do this, we need to anchor it right. So up on the toolbar in the main window here, you can see this little anchors button here. And I'm going to go anchor this to the center top, like that. Yep. And now I actually want to move it down just a little bit so that it's not right at the very top of the screen, but it's a little bit down. So I'm going to set it to 15 for my Y position here. The reason I set the anchor for this is so that it anchors it from the center of the control instead of from the sides of it. So should be okay. Let's also go and name this health bar. Health bar like that. So we should be all right here. Now we're going to add a label for points. We'll put it over in this corner here in the top right corner. So I'm going to add a label like that. Let's name it right away. Points label. That. Good. Now make sure this is a child of the UI, not a child of the health bar. So here you can see it's a child of health bar, and we actually want it to be a child of the user interface root node here, like that. Okay, let's go to the properties here, and I'm going to set the text. I'm going to set it to 0000. Should be nice and easy. That's just so that we have a placeholder so we can sort of see where it's going to be. And I'm going to go down here to my horizontal alignment. I'm going to set it to right because I want it to be over on the right side of the screen. And we're going to go and anchor this to the top right, like that. And let's go in and move it in just a little bit here. So I'm going to go find my layout transform. So inspector, layout, transform, and I'm going to set the position. So let's say set it to 15, and then I'm going to move it in 15 from this. So if it's 560, 15 less than that is 545. So there we go, and you can see this label for the points here is not quite in the top there. You can set a different font for this. You can add a whole bunch of different things if you go to your theme and your theme overrides. Right now, we're just going to leave this as is. So there we go. We've got a health bar. We've got a points label. That's all we're going to do. I'm going to save this scene, and you should see it just like this. Now what we want to do is we want to add a script to the UI here to actually control this. So I'm going to go to my UI root node, click Add a Script. I'm going to leave it just as UI.gd. And here we go. We don't really need to do very much with this. This just extends control. I'm just going to add in a couple functions here. The first one is update. So func update health and current max. This function here is going to update our health when the main scene calls it. So this is going to pass the information and set the health bar correctly. So I'm just going to go health bar dot max value equals max, and health bar dot value equals current. There we go. Alrighty. Let's do another one here. Func update points. Points. Like this. This points in here, by the way, this is called a parameter. So this is a function. Points is called a parameter, and this is something that when we call this function, we can give it information in the form of a parameter and do something with it. So points label dot text equals str points. So I'm going to pass in a value of points, and then I'm going to change it to a string, so it's letters and numbers or symbols instead of a number, and then we're going to set it to the label here. You notice here that our UI does not track the number of points. Our main scene is going to track how many points we've got. Our UI is just going to show it. All it does here is it just says, yep, you have, like, we can change the text of that label here and go from there. Now, from the main scene, you could directly set the text of the points label, but it's better practice to do it this way because we might want to add something to it, right? I might want to say points like this so that that label says points in front of it. It tells you how many points you've got. Or I might want to change the formatting, or I might want to change the health bar so that if the if your health goes below 20%, it changes it to red or something like that. That's something that I can do in the UI, And the way I've set it up, I can do that in the UI, and it's only changing code in the UI. The rest of the game doesn't need to know about that, right? So it's limiting the scope of these changes here and making my life easier in the future. Okay? So let's save your game here. Make sure that your UI script is saved and all that sort of stuff is saved. And now we're going to go connect the main scene to this. So we're going to go over to main scene here. You've got main scene, map, player, and we're going to bring the UI into this. So I'm going to drag the UI.tscn here onto main scene. Should appear on the bottom here, which is great. On the bottom is good because it means it draws on top of everything else. But it's not in the right place. It's way up here. So let's actually change this layout here. So I'm going to go to the transform and my position. I'm actually going to reset this. Oh, that's nice and easy. Just 0, 0. And you can see it shows up right here. So there's my points label and my health bar is near that somewhere. Should be good. Okay. Alrighty. So let's save that. Now I need to connect the signals. So my main scene doesn't even have a script yet, but it's going to need a script in order to collect this information and to connect it. So I'm going to go create a script, mainscene.gd. Great. Click create. And in this here, what I need to do is I need to connect my player and my map up and then do something with it. So I'm going to go click on the player here. We're going to go node. I'm going to connect the health changed function here. Great. This shows up, and make sure that this little connected icon shows up here. I'm also going to connect up the player died signal like this. And you know what? Let's leave it at that. So when the player's health changed, what I need to do is I need to pass that information on to the UI. So I'm going to do $UI. $sign I can use to refer to a node in my scene here. So I've got UI here. Dot update health. And then I'm going to do current max, just like that. Now, this seems really straightforward, right? All I'm doing is this listens for a player health change, and then the UI, like I just pass the information. Whatever the player tells me as its current health, I just pass that over to the UI. Whatever the player tells me as its maximum health, I just pass that over to the UI, and I don't actually do anything to it, which is kind of exactly what you want. Maybe the main scene needs to know a couple other things here, like for on player died. This one here, it might need to do some other things, but right now we don't need to. Like, this is just passing the information. Here, when the player died, we might want this main scene to like freeze all the enemies or something else, but right now it's all we got. Let's try running this actually, and let's see if our connection works properly. So here's our game connected in here. Can move, and oh, there we go. And does the health bar go down? Yep, it does. I have to try and catch a bullet here. There we go. Yep, the health bar goes down nicely. I'm going to start it one more time, and I want you to notice something here. Notice when I start it, the health bar isn't there yet. There's no health bar until I get hit. Oops. Once I get hit, the health bar appears there, and then we go from there. So what's happening there is that when the player spawns, we don't know what its health is. So we should actually just change the player script here. Let's go back to player, find the player script, and where are we here? In our ready function, when we set the current hit points, we should actually just go health changed.emit current and max, just like that. So when the player spawns in, then it also sends a signal saying, hey, my health changed. And it's yeah, it's just when it's spawning, it's setting its health to maximum, which is fine. But that's all that we need here. Health change.emit. Okay, save it. Let's try it, see what we get. There we go. Health bar's working properly there. Boom. Boom. That's pretty good. Good. You know what? Let's take this here. We should put this into our enemy as well. So I'm just going to copy that line. And our enemy, I'm going to put that in there as well, just because we might want that later. And so this health change.emit line, we're putting in the ready function of our enemy as well. All right, so our main scene, we're going to go back here. And we've got on player died, which is great. We'll need that later. We want to listen for enemies here and get points. So I'm going to do var points points int equals 0, just like that. This is just a variable to store how many points we've got. It's an integer because we can only have integer number of points. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually listen to the map here, because we're listening for we're going to listen for the enemies from the map, and we're going to listen to when they die. So I'm first going to add in a function, and we're going to call it on enemy died, like that. And we're going to do add 1 to the points. Oopsies. Points. There we go. And then I'm going to do UI.update points. So when an enemy dies, we're going to add 1 to our points, and we're going to update the points here. This function is not connected to any signal at this point. What I want to do is I want to connect it manually. So I'm going to go to my map here. I'm going to go over to my signals again. I'm going to double click on enemy spawned and just click connect, which is great. And I'm going to take this enemy that spawned, and I'm going to do enemy.enemy died dot connect to on enemy died. Okay? So I'm going to take the enemy, which is, so when the map spawns an enemy, it tells me which enemy it spawned. That's this here. I take that enemy it spawned, I look for its enemy died signal, and I connect that enemy died signal to this new custom function that I made here that adds the points and updates the points. So this function is not showing connected yet, but whenever an enemy spawns, this will listen for that enemy to be spawned and will connect it into this signal here. And what you should see is if we did everything right here, and I sure hope we did. So if I go, there we go, and you can see my points are updating. Boom. There we go. And I now have 6 points. Hooray. 7 points. Okay. So our points are working great. Just like with the player, when the player's health, when the player spawns, we should emit a signal saying, hey, you know what, my health has changed. Similarly here, I'm actually going to take this UI.update points. I'm going to copy it. So this UI.update points, I'm going to copy it and put it in the ready function here, just like this, so that it updates the points immediately, and so it sets it to 0, which makes sense. That way we can leave our template or our zeros in the user interface so we can see where things are, and then this will update it to 0 as soon as the game starts. I don't need to emit a signal for this. I'm just putting it in ready because the main scene is tracking the number of points. Okay? So one last test here. There we go. Let's see. You can see it started at 0 and now it's at 1. There we go. Good. Cool. All right, it's working. My health bar's working. And we're good. Last thing that I want to do is we got to do something when the player dies, right? Nothing happens when the player dies, so let's actually go and change that. Let's go to our UI here, and I'm going to add a new label. That's already there. Here's my label. And I'm going to name this player died. Back to my 2D view here. Let's go set the text of this label to be "You died." There we go. And I'm going to set it to center for my align here. And I'm just going to go and anchor this right smack dab to the middle of my screen here. Done. Nice and in the middle. That works great. If I actually go back and look at my main scene now, you can see it's always displaying "You died" there in the middle, which is kind of not what we actually want. So I'm going to go to my main scene, or sorry, back to my UI scene here, and I'm going to hide the player died here just by clicking on this little eyeball here in the scene dock. So it's now hidden. Go back to my main scene, you can see, oopsies, if I save it, back to my main scene, and it's not showing there anymore. So we just need to add a little bit of script to our UI scene. By the way, this button here shows that this icon shows that you are connected. So my root node is connected to a script, and if I click on it, it actually brings me to that script, which is really nice. I need a new function, and it's going to be show player died. And all it's going to do is do player died.show. There we go. Super quick and easy. All this does is show that label. Doesn't do anything else. Okay. And let's go back to our main scene. So save this. Go back to your main scene code. We did connect our onPlayerDied signal here. So this is actually connected. If not, you can go to your player, go to the node, and double-click on PlayerDied here to connect it. But all this is going to do is going to do UI.showPlayerDied, just like that. So it's just going to show that player died message. And let's test it. Boom. Yeah, my health is going down, and I crashed into the enemy and died. So you can see it pops that message up. I didn't even get any points that time. Okay. There we go. This is our very simple Galaga game here. This is kind of all that we've got for it. And this is not a particularly fun game yet. It's not a particularly complex game, but the basics of the functionality are here. This game is working. I've got all the basics where I can shoot, I can take damage, it pops up a health bar, I can get points for the enemies, that sort of stuff. The basics are here. Now we can go and add more. So there's lots of other things we can do here. There's a huge number of things that we could add in terms of graphics updates. Like maybe I can add a little, rocket trail or something like that behind the enemy. Maybe I can make it so that my enemy flashes red, or the player flashes red when I get hit. You may also notice that the enemies crash into the player and kill them instantly. And maybe what I want to do is I want to change that so that the enemy crashes into the player and the player goes invulnerable for a second so that you can have a chance to move your player away. We should probably make it so the enemies explode. Maybe we should add a start button so that we don't go straight into the game, or a restart button so that if you die, you have a chance to restart the game and play from there. Okay? There's so many things that we can add here. We can add new types of weapons. We can add new types of enemies. Maybe our enemies come in and fly in different patterns, or so many different things that we can do like this. We can add bosses. But the basics of this game are here. That's all we were trying to do with this. We're just trying to get the basics done, and we'll add more later if you'd like. Thanks so much for following along. And this one's been a bit of a long one, but user interfaces are a thing. Have a great day, everyone. See you later.